Hi, I'm Pat Lentz, and you are listening to the Audio Description Narrators of America Know Your Narrator series.
Today we have Shavanna Calder joining us, who's a voiceover
Yeah.
artist. So happy to have you.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
Let's start off. What you love about audio description?
I started performing when I was 5 years old. I love art in its various forms, but I think being able to watch TV and watch movies and theater has been a highlight of my life and is one of the reasons I've been able to make it through this pandemic. And so the thing that I love about audio description, and one of the things that I'm passionate about as a Black woman, of course, is accessibility and the different audiences and who do we make certain things for. And so the thing I love about audio description is, one, I mean, selfishly for me, the ability to see art, to see TV, to see what's coming, but also the fact that I'm a part of something that is allowing more people to enjoy art. And that, yeah, that is part of who I am and why I do what I do.
How has your art, since 5 years old, influenced
Yeah.
audio description? Or how has audio description influenced your art?
It's interesting, especially with the conversations that we're having during this time, where we are acknowledging the variety of privileges that we have. And I think a lot of times when people think, oh, well, like you're a Black woman, so there are a lot of privileges that you don't have. And that's true, but there are a lot still that I do have. I think for me, it's just made me more aware and made me really curious to continue to learn outside of the things that before I started audio description that were outside of my day-to-day life. And I think that's important, honestly, to the world, that we all grow and continue to learn. So I think for me as an artist, it's just informed a whole new area that honestly before I was certainly more ignorant to. And I'm incredibly grateful for that.
Can you talk a little more about the curiosity that I love how you said from awareness to curiosity?
Hmm. I don't know if it comes from, I studied sociology in undergrad. So I've always been really curious about people, societies, the things that we consider to be normal or the experiences that we highlight as like, well, this is the lens through which we should all view the world, which at least in the US, but I would say globally as well, tends to be through a very like cis heteronormative white male lens, right? So anything that is not that, I am oftentimes very curious about. And that comes to like ability, race, gender, so many things. And so for me, this has certainly allowed me to explore more when it comes to ability. And I think it's important to approach the world with that lens constantly, like to be curious, you know, to not take our day-to-day experiences as normal for everyone because they're not.
Can you talk about some of the connection that you've had with audiences?
I haven't had a lot of interaction with audiences because it's only been recently, I would say, maybe since the start of this year or the end of last year, that we were even allowed to have our names included as the voice for audio description. So when I first started, we weren't allowed to talk about the projects we were working on, let alone have a credit. And so I think that kind of hampers your ability to connect with people because you're not allowed to say anything. A lot of times if I wanted to share a project that I was working on, I would just share it, let's say like from Netflix, from their Instagram account or something, but not say that I worked on it. So that really kind of hampers any further interaction outside of showing up at the studio and voicing, and that's it. But I wish that there was more. I would love for there to be more interaction. I, would be curious to know in your experiences how been able to do that. But at least for what I've done so far, we have to be pretty zipped on our participation.
Can you talk about some of the experiences you've had in audio description that may have been a challenge, either technically or creatively, that you're really proud of how you overcame it?
So I think on a very surface level, I would say it is really difficult as an actor first to read something with a fairly neutral tone, to not essentially be expected to act so much with your voice. That has been challenging. But deeper than that, I would say when I was in grad school, I studied vocal performance, and I did not, unfortunately, have the best experience. So I spent a lot of time after that seeing speech therapists and working on my voice. And so one of the things that happened when I started audio description, and then also recently I did a show, before everything that was shut down, that was in a house that sat about 750 people. So just like thinking about the different locations and audiences and adapting my voice to that, whilst overcoming in some ways the vocal trauma that I experienced in grad school. And I think one of the things that's helped me with that is just coming into account with like wonderful practitioners. But, again, back to the accessibility part of it, finally speaking with a practitioner who had specifically studied Black populations and understanding vocally where some traditions come from and how that registers on the voice differently. So to make sure that I felt safe and secure to vocalize in a way that felt genuine to me, which of course as voice artists is kind of central to what we do.
That genuine approach. And if we could even go back to when you said not act so much, that indicates to me that that performance you're doing, that neutral tone that you're providing still has elements of your acting in it, but just in a way that makes sure that the audience stays immersed in the story. Can you address that?
Yes. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's really, which is interesting as an actor, but essentially to be aware that there are actors on the screen doing their job, right? And to make space for that, and that I am complementing that performance and to not get carried away. The first series that I worked on was particularly difficult for me because it was a story that revolved around Blackness in a very dramatic way. It was definitely not a comedy. So just like emotionally making sure that I vocally did not get carried away, because the acting on screen was so wonderful that it was, it's doing what art does. It was having an impact on me. But in order for me to create something that the listeners can actually enjoy and for them to be able to have the full experience, I needed to be able to be as neutral as possible.
Well, and it's because of those efforts that you gave that it sounds like that impact, you gave the audience access to that impact.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I certainly, and, speaking to you is sort of cementing that for me, that I am so grateful to have been a part of that project in a way that I could complement what was happening on screen.
One of the things that I'm finding fascinating is that each audio description voice talent, like yourself and others, have addressed this kind of high wire act, that it's actually more challenging in ways to find that balance of being able to perform in a way that brings that reality to the audience in a way that sighted people just have, just because they're sighted.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is such a balance. And I'm really grateful that the folks that I collaborate with that have been doing this much longer than me are able to give me the tools, and especially during that first process to realize, when things are getting carried away. And I now have done, so many projects with them that, I have a better hold on it. And I think I'm able to just continue to provide a voice that I hope ensures that audiences get to thoroughly enjoy and be affected by the art that we all create and are a part of,
Could we explore that a little bit, if you're comfortable answering how your performance has evolved as you've grown as a audio description narration person?
Yeah, for me, it's interesting because, with coronavirus and me being in some ways away from what would regularly be my home in New York and being in California, I have done a couple of projects from a home studio, which I don't normally do. And in doing those projects, I've realized, I'm more aware of like my mouth noise, for example, which like I was not as before, or even just pacing. Like, honestly, I think sometimes you're reading text and you get ahead of yourself because you want it to be so perfect. And, just a way that I'm able to enunciate and digest all of the words so that it actually comes out and is, and that it's actually audible and not just a jumble, which sometimes in those early days it was, so just strengthening my technique so that it doesn't require as many takes, and that in some ways I'm able to edit on my own. The fact that they can trust me a little bit more to do it from home feels great.
Can you talk about where you'd love audio description to go based on what you know and maybe what you'd love to have?
Yeah, I mean, so for one, I think what Eric is doing over at IDC and audio description is great, which is essentially collaborating more with blind and low vision talent. I think that's important. I think in some ways it feels against my interest to say that, but as someone who identifies as part of a marginalized community, I think in some ways, not that there isn't space for everyone, but there is a certain power and something that changes when you actually collaborate with people who are affected by the stories that are being told or whose stories are being told. So, for example, the fact that I'm able to work on certain films or TV shows that have predominantly Black casts, there are certain things in a script that I read and I know culturally, or even just names sometimes, because I am Black. And so I think it goes back to the curiosity, like the ability to think outside of our experience and go, oh, right, like maybe this is not my story to tell, or this is absolutely my story to tell. And so I want to be involved. I think that's important. And then I know they're not the same, but what's been interesting to me is, before all of this, I traveled a lot for work and just to see friends and family. And when you're outside of the US, it is so normal to see movies with closed captioning. Like it's a cultural experience that is the norm there. But yet for us, it's like, what? This movie or this TV show has closed captioning, get that off the screen. It's still not generally or widely seen. And so I guess for me, I would like to see audio description and closed captioning just continue to be a part of the general narrative and not something that's pushed to the side as much.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
I'm incredibly grateful for this opportunity, one, to speak to you, but also to be a part of this community and to be a part of this work. And I hope people, continue to listen and continue to advocate, again, for people who are not necessarily a part of your everyday lives, and to realize the importance of accessibility in all of its forms.
Shavanna, how can we reach you? Either a website or social media?
Oh, sure. I am on Instagram at ShaviXO. That's SHAV as in Victor, IEXO. That's thanks to I think it was my 5th or 4th grade teacher. That was my first nickname. I have a website, ShavannaCalder.com. ShavannaCal, D as in David, ER. And I would say those are the main places.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a good one.